we count it a blessing to be able to live there and serve the Church of the Nazarene in the ways that we can as missionaries. We're just ordinary people following God's call in our lives. It just happens to be that call makes us live halfway across the world. It's hard for our family and friends that we have here in America, but we ask them to come visit us, and so some of them do, and that's great as well. But we live in South Africa, but we work in surrounding countries as well because we're attached to the Africa South Field. And that's because the continent of Africa is huge, and so the church is divided up into different fields to help organize the work. Sometimes it's divided by language or people groups. And so if you can see in the picture here, it's kind of hard maybe from you being far away, especially in the back. But I'll tell you what you're looking at. It's a little map of southern Africa and the countries where we work. So South Africa is the biggest one, the kind of green, just colored one there. We also work in the country of Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, and the smallest country on our field is one most people have heard of, called Swaziland. Anyone heard of Swaziland? All right, good Nazarene if you know Swaziland. Right? We may or may not have heard that it's no longer called Swaziland. About a year and a half ago, the king of Swaziland is ruled by a king, by the way. It's the last monarch in Africa. The king decided it was time to change the name. After 50 years of independence, I guess that was the right time. I don't know. But he decided it was time to change. And so now it's known as the Kingdom of Eswatini. So Eswatini is a Siswati word, a word of their language. And translated, it literally means the land of the Swazi people. Swaziland. But it's in their language, and so that's important for them, their own country. So we would still talk about it as Swaziland because that's what everybody knows. But sometimes we'll also say Eswatini just to help kind of get us all in the new name. And as you can see there, we've also added another country to our field, the country of Madagascar. Madagascar, the Church of the Nazarene has been in Madagascar for many years, but it had been on a different field up until the beginning of March. They've realigned a few of the countries in Africa with the new fiscal year in March, and so they said, nope, Madagascar is now part of the Africa South Field. So now we have 6 countries on our field. We've traveled to our other 5 countries. We've not had the opportunity to go to Madagascar yet, because we were here on March 1st. So we look forward to, though, being able to travel there in June or July sometime when we get back to the field. The 5 countries there in southern Africa, we do a lot of our travel on the road. We drive 5 to 6 hours to get to most of our districts. Not all of them, but many of them. We won't be able to drive to Madagascar, of course, because it's an island, right? Even the kids know that, right, from the cartoon Madagascar movie. But again, we look forward to adding that country onto our field. It does add another language to our field. They speak French and Malagasy there, so we don't speak either one of those languages either, so it'll be a little bit of a challenge. It's something to adjust to for everybody involved. If we go on to the next slide, you see here, so I said we have 6 countries, and so those kind of different shapes up there, the shapes of the countries, and their flags that are associated with each one of those 6 countries. Altogether, there's 25 districts. So our country, many of our countries are divided into districts, much like the U.S. church is divided up into districts. And about 80,000 Nazarenes altogether. And that's a wonderful testament to the work of the Church of the Nazarene for the many, many years. Missionaries that have gone there for over 100 years to that part of the world. And now the development of local leaders as well, allowing more churches to be planted, more Nazarenes to come into the church. And so we celebrate that. We'll go to the next slide to see a few more facts and figures. I like numbers. Anybody here like numbers? I'm a numbers guy. So about 92 million people live within our 6 countries. That's a large population. So there's still much work to be done in areas that the Church of the Nazarene has not gotten into yet, we've not reached out into. So that's one of our focuses for this year, 2020, and next year, is to get out to those areas where the Church of the Nazarene does not have a presence. Another focus is to go back into the cities. Many of our churches are in the villages, in the rural areas, and so having a presence in the city is also an important part for the church to have. But churches in the city are just different, very different than the churches in the village. And I'm sure you can be aware of that as well. And so we're trying to train up pastors to go into the cities and start churches there in the urban settings. Altogether, geographically speaking, the areas of our countries make up about 40% of the size of the U.S. So it's a lot of land as well. So a lot of people and a lot of land in our part of the world. South Africa alone as a country is about twice the size of Texas, and a population of about 57 million. So more than half of that whole population live in South Africa. If you want to go on to the next slide. As a missionary, any good missionary, most of us here that are part of the church, we have many hats that we wear and different responsibilities that we have within the church structure. So as a missionary, we serve in many different areas. You see some of those listed there. Beth and I both coordinate Work of Witness for our field. These are the short-term missions teams that come in from, most of them come from America, but sometimes they're coming from other countries, and work with our other local churches or districts on our field. And we've hosted many Work of Witness teams in their 6 years. We've had 2 teams already this year. We had one in January and one in February before coming back to the U.S. And we have a busy schedule for the rest of the year as well. So we look forward to those opportunities because we view Work of Witness as a partnership. Churches that are coming, working with the churches that are there. And that partnership is a wonderful time of seeing God bring people together who otherwise wouldn't have a reason to come, right? Reason to be together. And out of that, many relationships are developed. And God works and moves, and He changes lives. Has anyone been on a Work of Witness team? I see a few faces that look like good Work of Witness people. So. There's also good news, it's not too late, right? There's still time to go and Work of Witness teams all around the world. And so wherever your church is going to go next, I encourage you to pray about going. If it happens to be our part of the world, we'll meet you at the airport, all right? But we do really enjoy Work of Witness and the opportunities that provide with bringing the church together because we are a global church. You know that? Global church. That means that we are all around the world, literally, right? I think the latest number is 163 world areas that the Church of the Nazarene is in, at least the ones that we can talk about, right? And so that's exciting as well, to be part of a global church. So some other areas of responsibility, Beth and I do, there's a field office as well. Sometimes we have to go into the office, when we have to, right? And so I work in the area of field finance, so I work with the monies coming in and out of the countries and districts on our field. Beth works in the area of our field statistics. Each church on our field, which by the way we have about 800 churches, but each one of our churches has to submit an annual pastor's report, just like the U.S. churches have to. So that's a whole list of questions that each of our churches answer. They send that information from the local church to the district, and then districts, or 25 districts, send that spreadsheet to Beth. And then Beth works with a few other people to help enter all that information into the global system. And this allows the Church of the Nazarene then to know how many members are in different world areas, what is the church doing, is it growing, is there issues, many different ways that the Church of the Nazarene can use those numbers as statistics to help provide information to provide to the other churches or other world areas. So these are some of the ways that we're working and helping on our field and on our districts. A lot of our roles and responsibilities are support roles, right? We're no longer, missionaries no longer need to be the ones that are planting churches or really doing that kind of development or evangelism in our developed countries, in our developed districts. But they still need support. And so we're able to support our districts in the ways that I mentioned. Another way that we support our district is through some teaching and training. About 20 minutes from our home in South Africa is the Nazarene Theological College. And this is a campus where students can come from South Africa and neighboring countries. They come for theological education. Oftentimes it's the young people that are able to come to the campus to be trained to be in the ministry, to be a local pastor, to be a youth pastor, to be a children's pastor. Those who have a call, the campus there at that college is the place where they can come and get that education. And Beth and I have been able to teach there a number of times. And it's a wonderful opportunity to work with these students who have a call to ministry. It's an important aspect, again, of the growing, developing church in Southern Africa is the training up new pastors, right? New leaders. Of our 800 churches, only about half of them have an ordained minister as the pastor. We have a lot of lay pastors, a lot of pastors who are in the course of study, but that takes time and resources financially to do the classes and things like that. And so we should try to help out however we can with the teaching opportunities as well. Sometimes we'll travel to a district to do a class if they need to do a class with one of the extension centers there, but that's another need, an area that we can just help support on our field. We go on to the next slide. Talking about work and witness, this is a picture from our work and witness team that we had just in January. A team from South Arkansas came to Tonga, South Africa. A small village where the district there had a vision to plant a church. About 10 years ago, they had a vision. They sent some people from one of the other neighboring churches to go and to start a work there. And they started to work, Bible studies, and things with children ministry. And then quickly developed the idea that there was a need to have a church building. So then they began building a church building. Many of them were ladies who were there as part of the church. And they were the ones that were starting to lay these blocks, these cinder blocks for the walls. So they started building up the walls. And they got up to about roof level. And unfortunately, some of the people there had to move out of the area because of job changes. And there really wasn't a way to keep the building process going. And so it was for about 6 years, the building was left unfinished. The people still had a vision for the church to be completed and wanted it to be done, but didn't have a way and didn't know how. We kept praying, asking God for a way to have this church be completed. Well, as they were praying, things happened on the district. There were changes. A new district superintendent came on, and he in his talking with us in one of the district assemblies, said, we have this church that we really would like to see finished. We don't know how, and just asking, is there any way that the field or the global church could help with that? And we said, yes, it's a great opportunity for Work and Witness to come and partner with you and help finish this church. And so that's what happened in January. The picture you see there, that's not the team from South Arkansas. That's the team from South Africa. These are local pastors and other district leaders. So this isn't their church, but they have a church in that district. They came out every day to work with that team from South Arkansas to help finish this building. When we got there, there was no roof. There was a few little walls, not much. But we were able to put the roof on. We mixed the cement for the floor, put in doors and windows, and made it a finished building for them to have there. Even got to be able to put a sign to see up there. It says, Church of the Nazarene, Tonga. So now people going by can see that this is the Church of the Nazarene. We also were able to put a sign out by the road so people would know that there's a church there and they're welcome to come. And they'll really help impact that community for the kingdom and for the Church of the Nazarene. And so it's a good story of how, again, Work and Witness is partnering with different churches coming together for a common goal to help the kingdom of God. Whether it's building a church or building classrooms, doing evangelism, there's so many ways that Work and Witness teams can come and help. Medical missions is one way. Through technology teams now are coming to help work some of our schools and universities. Just about any skill that you would have could be used in a Work and Witness team. So don't feel like you're excluded now. Teachers, whatever, lawyers even. If there's any lawyers, I'm sure they could be used on a Work and Witness team. So, but we really do enjoy Work and Witness. It's again a testament of being a part of a global church. If you want to go to the next slide. Another area of being part of a global church is the response to natural disasters. In our part of the world, we call them cyclones. We call them hurricanes here. And I'm sure you're familiar with them being in Florida. But a little over a year ago, there was a cyclone that hit the country of Mozambique. Mozambique is not part of our field, but it's a neighboring country. South Africa and Eswatini both border Mozambique. When Cyclone Aida hit, it took out many villages, many towns in Mozambique. They lost everything because of the floods, the damaging winds. Families were torn apart, and it was devastating to the churches there as well. When it happened, there was a call to respond. There was offerings that had been taken all around the world to help financially to support the work that was going to be needed there, to rebuild and supply the needs of the people. Well, our churches, wanted to be involved as well. They wanted to help with the needs of responding to that disaster. But many of our members don't have income, or they don't have much income. And so they weren't necessarily able to give financially, but they wanted to go. Actually, some of the people wanted to go right away into Mozambique. And so they're not ready yet for people to go, because right when the disaster happens, there's a few things that need to happen to help stabilize before teams can start going. But now they're starting to send teams in to rebuild the churches. But they wanted to help, they wanted to respond. And so the local churches then began thinking of ways that they could respond. One of the ways that they thought of to respond was to start collecting the things that they already had. Pulling their own clothes together to donate. Pulling food from their own pantries or from their own cupboards to donate. The pictures you see there are boxes of clothes, bags of food like rice and other staple foods. The people of the churches, they gave for what they had. They had very little, but they gave because they felt called by God to respond, and they wanted to respond. And they met that need. We had 3 collection points to collect these items from our districts. And we filled a 3-ton truck twice. One from South Africa and one from Eswatini. They were able to drive across the border and deliver the items to the churches that were there close by to help them distribute the food and the clothing to the people of Mozambique. We also had a church in the U.S. that partnered and helped raise funds to purchase tents because those who lost their homes didn't have anywhere to sleep. And so they were to purchase 5 tents as well for 5 families to sleep in. And so again, another story, another example of how we are part of a global church. And the Church of the Nazarene has always been very good at responding to natural disasters. And our churches as well want to respond in that way, being part of the Church of the Nazarene. I'm going to go on to the next slide. This is a picture from our district superintendent retreat that we had a few years ago. As I said, we had 25 districts. So we have 25 district superintendents. And they're all local leaders. They're all local ordained ministers from our own area, our own districts. And we celebrate that. We celebrate that it's no longer missionaries that need to be the district superintendents, right? We're able to train and develop their own leaders to be leading their districts. And many of our districts are phase 3. That means that they're self-supporting. So they don't need any other outside financial support to just operate as a district. But their local churches pay for their district budgets and things like that to help support run the district. So every once in a while we like to get together our district superintendents and have a time we call it retreat. Have you ever been on a pastor's retreat or leader's retreat? There's not always a lot of relaxing going on. It's more like a conference, right? We have workshops and talking and some worship services as well. It was a great time. There was some relaxing, but also a great time of conversation. Our Church of the Nazarene is divided up into local churches and districts. And sometimes we see those as boundaries, right? This is our area. But in our context, we have a saying that we're better together, right? And that we can do more together. And so we really encourage our districts to be working together, right? Don't see that district boundary as a line separating you from another district. See it as an opportunity to work together and maybe to reach out to another area where the church does not have a presence. And so this is what's happening. Our districts are starting to work together, whether it's planting churches or doing evangelism, working together for the kingdom. And by doing that, they can do more. And they are doing more, and we celebrate that. And these are some of the ways that, because we bring our leaders together and have those times of talking and worshiping together, they're able to collaborate, to network and work together. And so we encourage that at the district level, at the local level. Again, working together is how we'll accomplish more for the mission of God. This year, 2020, is a year full of retreats or conferences for the Africa region. We have 2 Africa regional conferences coming up. We do have another planned district superintendent retreat. There's a missionary retreat planned, a pastors and leaders conference planned, and I think there's something else that I'm forgetting. But there's many different conferences that are going to be happening in this year 2020. So we'll be busy traveling to those events and activities as well, and look forward to all those times of gathering together the church body. One note of when we have our missionary retreat, really it's celebrating what's happening on the continent of Africa within the missionary group. 40% of the missionaries now in Africa are from African countries. And we celebrate that. No longer is it only Americans coming to be the missionaries. The church in Africa is starting to send out missionaries. They're sending out worker witness teams as well. They're being part of the sending, not just the receiving. And that's an important distinction for our churches to be a part of recognizing that. Our churches also support the World Evangelism Fund. Right? They give to that global offering as well. And so, again, showing that we are truly a global body. And when we have our General Assemblies, delegates from our districts are able to come to General Assembly and be a part of the general body when they're voting and making those decisions that affect every church. Our church members are able to be a part and participate in that as well, and we celebrate that. If we go on to the next slide. Does anyone like a birthday party? Sure, right? Is anybody here 100 years old? No? You might feel like it? Yeah. Well, if you were 100 years old, then you would have been alive when the Church of the Nazarene started work in South Africa. It was 1919. The missionaries first were able to go into South Africa. They'd already been in Swaziland, right? We all know those stories from the Smelling Bath. When starting the work in Swaziland, they were then able to come back into South Africa and begin the work in 1919. So in 2019, that was last year, we celebrated. We had a centennial celebration, they called it. We gathered together many of our brothers and sisters within the Nazarene churches to celebrate this 100 years. The pictures here are from the soccer stadium that we met in. Now the stadium holds about 30 or 40,000 people. We didn't get to fill the stadium, but we filled the one side, and we had about 3,000 members come and celebrate and have a wonderful time together. If you're familiar with people from Africa at all, when they worship, they like to sing and they like to dance. And when these guys were worshiping, the music was loud and the dancing was enough to be shaking the whole stadium. You can feel it wherever you were. It was very moving, right? But it was a wonderful celebration. And like any good birthday party, right? You need a birthday cake. Well, I had a birthday cake. It was about the size of like 2 9-foot tables put together. It was very big, biggest cake I think I've ever seen. Well, we were standing up in the stands, with everybody else, and our 4-year-old son said, "I have a piece of cake." Well, I don't know if there's enough to go around. But thankfully somebody was able to bring him up a piece of cake. So he had a piece of the celebration birthday cake. And so he was happy to have that cake. But again, going back to the centennial celebration, it was a wonderful time to look back at the last 100 years. The missionaries who've come over all those years to South Africa, and the pastors and leaders who've been trained in the schools there, and developing leaders is an important aspect, as I mentioned. But it also allowed us to look forward to the next 100 years, right? As the Church of the Nazarene is going to still exist in 100 years, we need to be thinking about that, right? One of the areas that we need to be working on in our context in Africa, and maybe true here in America, is developing our young leaders, giving them an opportunity to be a part of the leadership of the church so that they will continue to stay in the church for it to exist in 100 years. Also training our young pastors and supporting them. Oftentimes, a pastor will finish the college degree program. They maybe get a small church, and well, some of our churches they have challenges. Do you ever have challenges here in churches in America? No. Okay. Well, some of our churches they face challenges, and these young pastors get discouraged. Do you ever get discouraged? No. Sometimes our young pastors they get discouraged so much that they end up leaving the church. Right? And that's sad, and that shouldn't happen. We need to be supporting our young pastors and helping them in their ministry to be able to continue the work of the church, especially being a leader of the church. And so at the Centennial, we were able to kind of talk about that, acknowledge that, and work together as districts and other leaders, identify how we can take steps to improve in that area. Many of our young people are going off to university, and they're not finding a church there at the university, so they don't stay with the Nazarene Church. And so that way they can get a job, they may be a part of another church or no church at all. And so it's kind of a lagging generation that we're finding in our churches. And so we want to make good efforts to bring them back and to keep them involved in the church. And so the Centennial event was a good way, a good catalyst for all of our districts and all of our leaders to be looking forward as well. And so we had a great time of celebration. If we go to the next slide, I think these again are the 6 countries of our field. I shared a few stories of things that we're doing, things that are happening on our field. Our roles as missionaries are supporting. We're supporting our districts. We're supporting the work that's been going on for 100 years and hope to continue to go on. But in our supporting roles, we want to just be faithful to God. Whatever He is wanting us to do, however we can help, we want to be there, involved and working. And so we look forward to going back to the field and continuing our work in ministry there. I'm going to call now my wife up. She's the reverend of the family, if you didn't know that. And she's going to share a few more stories from a different context.
Sorry. So Joe shared some stories about what God is doing on the Africa South Field, some of the ways that God is moving and God is working. And I just want to share a couple of stories from the Bible where God was working and moving just like He was working and is working and moving today, that He was working and moving back then. And do you know that He used the same tools back then that He does now? Do you know what those tools are? Ordinary people and ordinary things. Things that other people would look over. People that other people would say, no, that's not going to work. They're not going to be able to do anything. But when they believed in God, He did mighty things in and through them. Joe mentioned that we teach at the Nazarene Theological College, and whenever we love teaching out there and getting to mentor some of the students that are there, and whenever we tell them that they're going to their states, they beg us to take them with them. And we don't have the resources to get them all on an airplane, nor are they small enough to fit into a suitcase. So we were trying to figure out a way that we could bring them with us. And so today you will hear the word of the Lord from our students. They'll be reading that to you. There will be some subtitles at the bottom. And once the video is done, just go ahead to the next slide. It'll show the whole text so you can... We understand the accents, but we know that some people have a little bit of trouble with it. So please hear the first story tonight.
Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea.
All that night, the Lord drowned the sea with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land.
The waters were very
Israelites went through the sea on dry ground.
with all water on their right and their left.
So you wake up this morning and you feel like God is telling you that you need to lead the Spring Hill Church of the Nazarene out of Spring Hill, and you need to march against, which this actually is appropriate now, there's a whole army of, you need to march against the coronavirus, let's just say. All right? You need to lead the congregation of Spring Hill against the coronavirus. What tool would you want? You're all out of Lysol and antibacterial. What would you want? That's right, an engine so we can move people out of the way, right? That's right, and he would be able to trap it. So a machine that would be able to help you, right? Yeah? And then, that's right, and then burn it. I like it. I like your thinking. What would you say if I told you that the only tool you would get is this? Would you still sign up for the job? Probably not, right? Well, that's what Moses did. After how many times of asking Pharaoh to let my people go, finally he got the go-ahead, right? And so he's going with his people. Now this is in the days before GPS and maps and satellites and all of that. But do you think that they knew that they were fleeing towards the Red Sea? I think they did. I think they knew that they were running right for the Red Sea, but what choice did they have? Behind them they had the Egyptian army that had changed their minds and said, you know what? This was a good deal that we had. You guys worked for us for free. We don't want to let you go anymore. Have you ever been chased by a dog?
Yes.
You could hear the dog coming. Imagine if it was an entire army. They're fleeing. They get to the shores of the Red Sea. I wonder how many of them, I wonder if they actually bumped into each other. You know, you see in the cartoons, somebody stops and the person behind them not paying attention and it just sort of causes a domino effect. I wonder if that happened. They get to the Red Sea and I bet they thought, now what? But then Moses takes a stick. Peter, my son, has heard this enough times. I said stick the other night, and he was sitting in the front row, and he came over to me and he said, Mommy, it's not a stick, it's a staff. So, sorry, it's a staff. It was just a staff. It was just a stick. There's nothing in the Bible that says it was anything special. It wasn't carved out of any special wood or dropped down from heaven. It was just a stick. And he takes that stick and he holds it over a body of water. And then what happens? It parts. Now, when I've read this story, in my microwave mind, I like to get things done quickly. I kind of thought that it happened. He put the stuff out and then it happened, right? That's what we would like. We want things to happen quickly. But it actually says overnight. Overnight the wind blew and the waters divided. It's one thing to wait there for a few minutes, right? How about for overnight? As you're hearing the horses get closer. And then the next verse says, or the next part of the story that I want to pull out, is that the Israelites crossed on what? Dry land. If it wasn't a miracle enough that God led people to walk through a sea, there was a second miracle. Dry land. And sometimes, you guys are close enough to the beach to know, it takes a long time for things to dry out. Overnight it would not dry out. But they crossed on dry ground. Have you ever tried to flee anything in mud? Have you ever even tried to walk in mud? It's not so easy, right? You don't get anywhere. You're gonna get. It would have trapped them for the Egyptian. They could have just plucked them out, no problem, right? God used an ordinary man with an ordinary stick, and he did something extraordinary. There's another story where God uses an ordinary boy and also a very ordinary tool. If you go ahead to the next video.
David fastened on his sword over the turning and dried water around.
Not used to them.
I cannot go to these, he said to Saul, because I am not used of them. So he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream.
Put them in the pouch of his shepherd's
Then in his hand approached the Philistine.
All right. Next day you wake up. You handled fighting the coronavirus. Check. Now there's a giant. He's like 3 times taller than your dad. It's no big deal, right? And the weapon of choice this time around is not a stick. It's a slingshot and some stones. You're up for that, huh? You know that's good. Slingshots and some stones to take on a giant there are a lot of different views on how big the giant was, but it was a big giant, all right? It was big enough that the Israelites had been camped out there for quite a while, waiting for somebody to be brave enough to fight this giant. Goliath was taunting the Israelite army. Hey, you guys don't have anybody. Nobody's brave enough to fight me. And all the soldiers are going up and looking and saying, yeah, no, sorry, not today. Not doing this. But then there's a boy. Now, at this point, the rulers had gone through all the other brothers. And they, nope. David, the little shepherd boy, says, I'll do it. I'll go. Because of the God that I serve, right? And what did they do? They tried to put the armor on, the armor that they trained in. It would be kind of like me trying to put full-size football pads on Peter. He would be able to move around, right? He said, no, this doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. I can't do this. I'll go with what I know. His sticks and his slingshot. Yes, that's right. I said, you're right. Thank you. Good job. Listening. The stones and the slingshot. You want to come along? Tomorrow we're going to Tallahassee. You want to come with us? His stones and his slingshot. And he takes out a giant. A little boy that everybody else overlooked. With armor that didn't, no armor really, not the armor that didn't make sense. And there are a couple of things I want to pull out from this story quickly. Number one is, sometimes what God calls us to doesn't make sense to other people. And it's easy to say that. I'm going to push a little bit. It's easy to say that about stones that we know really we're not going to get called to fight a giant with stones, right? But does it make sense to love your neighbor as yourself? Does it make sense to turn the other cheek? To go the extra mile even when you know that person is taking advantage of you? Does it make sense to forgive 77 times 7? Which actually what they're trying to prove is stop counting, just forgive. Those things don't make sense. They're not popular. You're not going to win any prizes. That's what God calls us to. And sometimes God calls us to make moves that don't make sense. And you say, okay, here's where it is. The missionary is going to ask us to come to Africa. I can turn it off now, right? Sometimes we just have to make a move across the street. To talk to somebody that we wouldn't normally talk to. To talk to somebody, and I might be getting into some hairy territory here. To talk to somebody that we know their political views are not the same. That's right. I'm going to stop there, right there. I'm not going to go any further. But God calls us to love one another with His love. With the same God that called David to go and get some stones from a stream, He's calling us to love our neighbor as ourselves. He's calling us to talk to those across the street, across the pond, across the ocean. But we have to be willing. In the same way that God called Moses and David to be willing to do something impossible, God is calling each of us to be willing to do the impossible with ordinary people and ordinary tools. All we have to do is be willing. Think of the story in the New Testament. Peter walking on water. Peter was already a disciple. He already believed in God. It wasn't a question of whether or not he was going to heaven or not. Think of that story of faith. All because he was willing to step out of the boat. He could have said, yeah, Jesus, you said, you said come to me, but nah, I like my boat. I'm a fisherman. I know that actually, sorry. I know that I can't walk on water, so no, I'm going to stay here. The little boy with his lunch. Ordinary lunch. He could have kept it. He was probably hungry. He's a little boy. They're always hungry. Instead, he gave it up and fed more than 5,000 people. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things with ordinary tools. There's another ordinary tool that God does extraordinary things through, and that's the World Evangelism Fund. For those of you that don't know what that is, the World Evangelism Fund is the global fund that the Church of the Nazarene is a part of. So every local church that participates pays in a percentage, 5.5% of their tithes and offering, into this global fund, and with that, I can literally promise you that it reaches around the world. Does anyone have a dollar that I can borrow, and I really borrow, I'm going to give it back? Thank you, ma'am. I'm just going to take one. Now, you gave me this dollar, thank you very much. Could you give this dollar to South Africa? Yeah? Would it still be worth $1 at that point? After you did all the exchange and... Right. $1, right? It's simple. We can't... Joe, when we got off the plane, we had a little bit of time when we landed in Atlanta. And Joe, I said, I'm going to go get some sort of drink with caffeine in it. I didn't really care what kind at that point. And he said, all right, I'll give you $5. You can buy whatever you can buy. And I was like, well, all right, I guess I'll just stay here because $5 in the airport isn't going to get you very much. But $1 isn't much, right? But do you know that if my friend here gave me $1, if we all gave $1, now we're talking about something, right? With $1 in South Africa, you can buy about three cinder blocks. Everybody together, you're getting closer to a building, right? $1 wouldn't, those students that you saw, $1 would help with maybe a notebook for their stationery that they do to write with. All of our dollars together, get a semester of school paid for, possibly. When we do things together, when we take our small and ordinary and we join it with other people's small and ordinary, it becomes extraordinary. Thank you very much. The cool thing is, it's not just our dollars that are going in together. Churches around the world participate in the World Evangelism Fund. Because a percentage is a percentage. If it's 5.5 of $1 or 5.5 of $1,000, the 5.5 is still the same. So all of us, no matter how rich or how poor you are, can participate equally in what God is doing. And I can promise you that God takes that offering and He blesses it and He multiplies it. With that offering, you are helping to educate the future, not just the future pastors and future leaders, not just in America, but around the world. You are giving chances to people who would not otherwise have a chance through pastoral education. The students do have to pay, they have to pay their school fees just like we have to pay school fees when we go to school here in the States. But the World Evangelism Fund offsets those costs. General Assembly, every church, every district gets to have, depending on the number of people in their district, just like here, every district gets to have delegates. The World Evangelism Fund helps to make it possible, for those delegates around the world to be able to come, to be able to participate in the work of being Nazarene. It's not just about a great fellowship time in the exhibit hall. It's also about the business that happens, the voting that happens, the decisions that happen. The World Evangelism Fund helps to make that possible. The World Evangelism Fund helps to pay our salaries. It helps. We are global missionaries. And so we do receive a salary from the World Evangelism Fund, and that means that we can focus on our work. We don't have to worry about, do I have enough money to be able to stay the next month, or do I need to use the money that I have left to come home? World Evangelism Fund is helping to plant churches in places I can't even talk about. And He's doing that through your faithful giving. your dollar goes from Spring Hill, Florida, and it reaches beyond the United States, all around the world. Again, we have to be willing to participate in it. God will do it other ways if we don't participate. But let me tell you how awesome it is to be able to participate, to be able to look at that and say, I was a part of that. Even our son, the churches that he gets to help us, he gets to join us on the team, he gets to look at that and say, wait, I laid that brick. Where at this point, he's more writing his name in the mortar than he is laying bricks, but he'd love to be able to do that. But I just wanted to take a few minutes and just really let you know the huge impact that your giving and your support and your love has, not just here in Spring Hill. And it's clear from listening to the stories of the people that we talked with that you guys are reaching out to your community here, but I want to encourage you that you're also reaching out to your community out there. And that's what it's about. So I wanted just to say thank you. Thank you for being ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things. And I want to encourage you to continue to be ordinary people who continue to do extraordinary things for God. We do have, my helper's not here tonight, or he found out about that there's a room with toys. And so he has been tempted away by the toys. But would you be willing, you helped me out already, would you be willing to help me tonight? Do you mind giving everybody on this side a card? Yeah. So we do have prayer cards. I'm going to ask you, if you would, take one, put it somewhere that you'll see it. And when you see it, please do say a prayer for us. We cover your prayers. We need your prayers. But more than that, pray for the students that you saw on the screen. Pray for the leaders that you saw on the screen. Because in the same way that we're trying to be faithful to what God is calling us to, they are too. And so pray for them as they seek to do that and as they try to do that. Sorry, I didn't give you enough. You can't make them multiply? So thank you so much for having us, for letting us share. And Pastor, is it okay if I open it up for questions, or do you want to do that later? Are there any questions? While you're thinking about that, I'm going to give this side the cards. There you go. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, well. Sorry, I snuck behind you.
That's all right. I do have a question, but
Oh, so,
trying to formulate it.
all right.
Makes sense. But I love to listen to politics. I'm one of the few probably that does. But how is that impacting the Church of the Nazarene? With what's going on in the world and different things? So how is mission being impacted?
Thankfully, the church has survived in most cultures some pretty horrible things politically. And thankfully the church continues to survive and God's work continues. And so even in the midst of what's going on here or there, not speaking of any country specifically, but God's people continue to be faithful to what God's calling them to there. And so does it affect things? Some. But thankfully God's work continues, even in spite of ways that different governments try to stop it. So where in our countries where we are, they're considered Christian nations. Much like the U.S. is considered a Christian nation. So there's not hostility towards the gospel or towards Christians. But it does make it interesting to have conversations with somebody that say, well, no, I'm a Christian, but you know that the way that they're living isn't. And so there is that. I mean, there's not persecution at all. Yeah, exactly. And so we do have that struggle some, and there's also some mix of religions, so to speak, if that makes sense. So there's groups of Christian, or there's a particular religious group that calls themselves Christian, but they also will pray to their ancestors and ask their ancestors to perform revenge for whatever, if that makes sense. And so that's also a little bit hard to talk to say, well, you know, do you believe in Jesus? Well, yes. Exactly. So, but we are very blessed that we don't have to, yeah. There are some parts of Africa that American missionaries will never get into. And so that's why it's so exciting to see our South African brothers and sisters and other people rising up and responding to that call. And they will be the way that North Africa is reached. It will not be through, no. Yes?
Do you have problems with witchcraft in that part of Africa?
We do. We haven't personally experienced it or had a problem with it, but it is a very big problem. That's somewhat the praying to the ancestors
Yeah.
that comes along with that. There's some gomas. There are even Christian funerals. Sometimes the family will demand that they go through some of the what we would call witchcraft rituals before burying. Simple. I mean, it doesn't. It seems somewhat harmless. Rinsing off or you making sure that you cleanse the they call it a spade, the shovel before you dig, and other things like that have roots in that. So it's a very difficult balance to walk, and that's why we rely heavily on our local pastors and DSs to help us to know how to navigate, because this isn't. We've been there 6 years, and we could be there 60 more, and we still wouldn't understand everything. And so they are the experts, and they are who we ask questions to and try to figure out things from.
Okay, good other question. Polygamy.
Yeah, so the king of Swaziland, Eswatini, has 16 wives? 16, 1-6. And each of them have their own residence, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes around it. It's not huge. It's not like some of the other places where we have friends serving, but it is not unheard of either.
Another question. I love that. Do they still have a practice of marrying off young girls, and when I mean young, for adults who are an animal itself?
So that's a process called lobola.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, from an African context, you're like, wait a minute, you're buying this girl.
Yeah.
But there are some cultural reasons for it, and having been explained it a little bit better, I understand it more. I still don't necessarily want my son to have to pay it, but if he were still to be in South Africa at that time. But what it is, it's similar to how the bride's family, differently, but it's similar to how the bride's family has to pay for the wedding. And I understand there's a wedding happening, so you guys know the fun of that, right? So this is a way that the husband-to-be, proves that he has the ability to provide for his soon-to-be bride. Also, when they lose a daughter, they're also losing a breadwinner. And so to an extent that replaces that money, or goats or cows, replace that loss. And thirdly, many times, not always, so you can't ever, nothing always happens, but many times the cows and the chickens and goats that are asked for are then slaughtered for the wedding feast. We're done. We're just answering questions. So it's not just okay. To buy your daughter. I know it's not your daughter, but it's going to be 10 cows, 13 chickens, 15 goats, and so. So does that sort of help? Yes, the practice still happens. It's not. It's mostly in the black culture. So I don't know. I wasn't near. There's 4 different people groups. Black South Africans, which would be what we think of as Africans. They're darker skinned. There's white Afrikaners, which are of this Dutch descent, but are still very much South African, born and raised there. There's the Indian culture group, which immigrated from the country of India. And then the 4th group is colored, and they are a mix of any of those 3 at any point in their line. The main culture group that practices that is the black South African, black Africans. But it gets interesting, and it's happening more and more as farther away we get from apartheid, is when a black African marries one of the other culture groups, and you have one that the family is expecting this, and you have another that says, no, and working through that and talking through that. So, yes?
So there you got very problems around the
It's becoming more of a problem, especially in Cape Town and our major city centers. Not radical, but the doctor that delivered Peter is Muslim. Sweet, wonderful lady, but she is a part of a large Muslim population in South Africa. Not a lot of radicals, but there are, I don't remember the correct term, but training camps for radical Muslims, especially in Cape Town. And Cape Town's they have a lot of problems with gangs, so that's a great place to be able to pick students or young people that are disenfranchised up and take them into a different family, basically. So it's not a huge problem, but it is growing. Right, correct. No, not at all. Yes.
Is there still tribal or caste?
Not necessarily caste. I don't know if Joe mentioned that there is very much a divide between the haves and the have-nots. Much bigger than here in the States. And here in the States, I understand it's growing. But there, you almost don't have a middle class. You have the obscenely rich, and then you have the people that, when we say are barely getting by, I don't mean they don't necessarily get to eat out. I mean that they may not get to eat. About half of the people in our field live on less than $2 a day. Now, that is a shocking statistic, and I don't want to take away from that, but it is also a different way of life. Many do live off the land. They have cows and chickens and goats and that type of thing that allow that to happen, but it is still very, very hard life. Many live in shacks. Peter just had a tree house built. Hold on one second, buddy. Just had a tree house built from some friends of ours that are immigrating. They had a tree house in their backyard, and so we said, oh, you guys are leaving, we can take it and make it work in our backyard. There are people that have less of a house than he does in his backyard, which is sobering to think about. Yes, ma'am?
Is it true that the locusts came and ate the crops?
I don't know that for sure. It didn't necessarily affect our part of the world. There other drought affected our area. We did have, it wasn't locusts, but there's apparently a pilgrimage of butterflies that some years is really, really big and some years is quite small. Well, this year particularly, it was massive. To the extent that I'm driving, I didn't know anything about it, I'm driving from the office. Hey buddy, I'm driving from the office and I see all these white butterflies. I'm like, what in the world? And I keep seeing it all the way to pick Peter up. And then even when I'm in the office at our home, I'm watching them fly over in droves, fly over the apartment or the complex across from us, just like a sea or a wave of butterfly. They make a pilgrimage from South Africa to Madagascar. Unfortunately, when doing some research, they are very important for cross-pollination, but they just sort of start dropping in the sea in between Madagascar and Mozambique. They don't really make it anywhere. They pollinate and then, but it was very beautiful. Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge and issue that you face every day?
For us personally, the biggest challenge is community. And I think that's true in ministry and even not just in ministry. Building community is not something that you just show up and you have good friends that you can just be real with. We live in an interesting place where we don't really fit in with the locals. We have some really good friends that are locals, but they don't fully understand. Trying to explain to some of our friends who aren't Christians that we're good friends with what we're doing right now is an interesting conversation. So you're traveling around the U.S. for how long to do what? It's kind of the questions that we get. But so for us, one of the hardest things is just building that community, and because we're in and out so much, having those lasting relationships can be hard. Yeah.
How do you tell a tribe that has 13 wives, 14 wives, about the gospel and about how godly we are?
That would be one that's. I'm going to play the local part on that one for sure. That's where we would really rely on the locals to talk to us about what that would look like. We probably wouldn't have a conversation. We Americans don't have the best reputation. We sometimes show up and tell people how it should be done, even though sometimes it shouldn't be done that way. And so we work really hard to try not to do that. And speak through our friends, and speak through our leaders, because that also gives them respect. And ultimately, they're the ones that are going to have to continue the conversation anyway. So if I start a conversation that I take them off on a completely wrong direction, then my friend here is going to have to be the one to try to get them back on the right road. But a lot of it would be just speaking truth and asking questions and that type of thing. I think we're going to do one more question before my son runs another lap around. He's already built the train a few times, it seems like. Yes?
How long did you learn how long did it take you to learn the African languages?
Well, still in progress. And we're on year 6. So South Africa has 11 national languages. If you add in the other countries, you're talking 15 languages.
How do you take English?
Thankfully, English is, except for Madagascar, widely spoken in all of the countries. And many of the languages are close enough that you can understand. So we speak some Zulu. We speak very little Afrikaans. And so we can greet, we can praise Jesus, and that's about it. But English is the predominant business language, and so we are able to communicate with all of our leaders. All of our district superintendents speak English. Many of our other leaders speak English, and so we're able to communicate in that. Yeah.
Because I take English and try to incorporate it into the message that you're trying to relay. It's like, that just blows my mind.
Yeah.
To try to get the message across. English probably has no relation to what the lifestyle they're living.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah. And that's again where we rely on the locals.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for allowing us to come, for taking your time, your Saturday night. I know there's a lot of places you could be, including planning a wedding. So thank you for taking your time.
All right. So we come to the really important part of the night. Right? Everybody enjoys hearing the stories, and that's good stuff, because obviously Joe and Beth and Peter are doing a lot of work. That's good work, and we appreciate that, because you're doing that for us as well. They represent us in South Africa, and that's a big deal. And so you guys know a little bit about the epidemic, pandemic, scary, whatever is going on, right? So what we're going to do tonight is, on your way out, I've picked the 2 biggest, most burly men I could find, and I put them at the door, and I told them to hold out the plates, and if you put something in, you get to leave. As simple as that, right? That's a joke. Just put a lot of money in there. We're good. Okay, so I do ask that you please do support Joe and Beth, and obviously Peter is a whole bunch of fun. I can tell that right now. So support them on your way out. I'd like to pray for us, and I imagine they're going to hang around a little bit if you want to come and talk to them personally. It's a little easier to come and talk to them probably. So let's pray together. Lord God, I thank you that we can come into this place and hear about the work that you're doing in South Africa. and all over that whole region. I ask God that you would continue to bless the Heath family. I pray, God, that you would give them direction, that it would be your direction. Give them vision, that it would be your vision. And Lord, that they would go in your name and reach people because you have called them to do that. God, help us, each one, to support them, to pray for them, to do what we can to let them know that we appreciate all that they're doing for us. And God, use us all to change this world for you. We'll give you the glory and praise. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, Amen.
I was like,